Okay, so when we were starting when I was starting all of this, I decided to kick it back to one of the more memorable books I read. So this is by Margaret Peterson Haddix, and it is called Among the Hidden. Um, I still remember this book from middle school, so let's just say that, okay? Like this, I literally went to the library and like looked it up just because I remember reading it in middle school. Um, it is technically a fourth to fifth grade reading level. However, I will say that I think a lot of the content in it is probably more suited to a middle schooler. Essentially, what's going on in this book is that you're following Luke, and it's kind of a dystopian society novel where Luke is a third born child in a world where the government dictates that you're only allowed to have two kids. And so, yeah, and it kind of goes on from there. He grows up on a farm, and so he's used to like still being outside and all of that. But all of a sudden, the government starts building houses behind his house, basically confiscates his land and starts building houses. And so then Luke is taken inside, and he basically has to stay there, mostly in the attic. And can never really come downstairs because the windows have to be closed, and it's all this stuff. And so in reading this book, there are a couple little hitches. I do have to say, and I will probably say it a few more times in this video, it's so good, guys. It's just so much adventure. It's so much fun. It's such a great book. But the few things that I think you need to look out for. Number one is that whole idea of like you can be scared of the government kind of thing. I think sometimes, depending upon how your kid does, that can be a little bit scary. More than that, because they do live in this society, there is talk of getting rid of babies. They never say anything flat out, but it is this idea that like the mother is expected to get rid of a child should she get pregnant a third time. There's also talk of sterilization, again, not said outright, but it is there was some kind of procedure that women are supposed to get after they have two kids. And so if you have a very inquisitive child, they may ask you questions about that. If you don't, I don't remember asking any questions about that. I just kind of took the book for what it was. So I would say kind of know your kid there. Again, nothing is like very in your face, but I just wanted you to be aware that those issues are kind of within the novel. More than that, they do live on a farm, so there is some talk of farm life, mostly of like a little pig dying or getting trampled because it's the runt of the litter, all of that. So heads up there, especially if you have an animal lover. There is this like underlying fear throughout the novel of what the government would do should they find Luke or find third children. Like it's always like this unspoken fear, but no one really knows for sure. You do find out by the end of the book. And that will be my very last warning. In this, there is mention, I marked it in here, there is mention of a bra, which, neither here nor there. I was a girl reading this book, so it didn't really matter to me. But if you hand this novel to a boy, just something to be aware of. Nothing's really discussed in a whole lot of detail, or like they mostly glide past it. I think it's like 2 sentences and then we're done. So just that, it's really a bra from a 12-year-old boy's perspective. So, and a 13-year-old girl. So here's my spoiler alert. So if you're watching this with your kid and they might read this, maybe don't let them see this part. My spoiler alert. And probably one of the higher end red flags on this novel is that he makes a friend who is also a third child. She is a little naive in the fact that she thinks she can change things. And so she takes a bunch of third children. They march on the president's house. And he gets retold this story from the perspective of her dad. And so I will say that this is like a grieving dad's perspective. But basically, she gets killed by the government, and her dad paints a rather vivid picture of, I think, like, one of the exact lines is like blood running into his garden or something to that effect, and the government cleaning it up before anyone notices or gets there. So heads up on that one. I might continue reading this series just to kind of see where it goes. But it is a series. I think that is like a fun thing, that it is a series of books. I think there's 6 books in this series. And so if you need a more adventurous book, this is definitely one of them. It's very catching. It's very thrilling. But it is, again, more of a thriller. I would probably classify it as like a kid's dystopian thriller, if that makes sense. There is a rather happier ending for Luke by the end of this book. And he does not have to stay hidden anymore. So, yes, I think if I was going to recommend this book, I would recommend it to a middle, even though the reading challenge wouldn't be there, the story is. So I would probably hand this to a middle schooler who is struggling to get into reading, because you do have a little more of those edgier topics. It is kind of an easy read as far as reading level, because it is 4th or 5th grade reading level. And then on top of that, it's a series that would keep them reading. So that's my recommendation. I'm never going to be like, yes, read this, no, read this. Most of my reviews will just be like, hey, know your kid, and know what they can handle, know what they can't handle. I personally think Margaret Peterson Haddix is a wonderful author. And my next book review will be on another book that she wrote as well. So yeah, look forward to that, and see you there.